It's always a pleasure to be here. It's always so interesting to hear what songs Bruce will come up with, because I have great appreciation for the research and the sensitivity with which you come up with songs. And even the fact that when you led us in the Shema, there is a tradition in the synagogues that because it is a prayer about unity, you exclude the rest of the world. You cover your eyes as you say that. Um, and Bruce was doing that as well. So I appreciate the sensitivity by which you do this stuff. Um, I've actually got myself a organized set of notes with times on it. So I'll be checking my watch so that I don't, do what my late wife used to call rabbi's disease, which is, while I'm speaking, let me say a few words, and carry it on too far. Let me tell you, first of all, a little bit about Jewish holidays in general, um, for folks who are not particularly familiar with our calendar. Well, several of the holidays, several of the best known Jewish holidays are based on events or instructions in the Torah, in the sacred book of writings. Uh, Events like Passover or Sukkot, which I talked about last year, are part of our mythic narrative of leaving Egypt, moving across the wasteland, and finally settling in God's promised land. And in various places, in the books of Exodus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, we are instructed do this, do that, do this at certain times of the year. Those are some of the holidays, and perhaps they're the best known ones. There's a second group of holidays which derive from later in Jewish history, um, often some mentioned in sacred books, but much later in time, about 1,000 years further on. Purim is one of those. It's written up in the book of Esther. Hanukkah, which people seem to conflate with like it's our Christmas. It's got nothing to do with Christmas. Is written up in the book of Maccabees. Ironically, the book of Maccabees is not in our sacred canon. Somehow it didn't make the cut. And the only reason we know about it is because it's been maintained in the Apocrypha. Simchat Torah is even later than that. The holiday which we're celebrating now was instituted as a way of marking the completion and beginning of the reading of the Torah. And that all could only happen after the canon had been compiled. And it's not clear exactly when the canon was compiled and when these books were written down. The Orthodox view, of course, is that everything in the Torah, when I say Torah, generally I mean the five books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Although the word Torah could include the entire thing, Psalms, Kings, Proverbs, all that stuff. Generally, though, it's the five books. Um, the official word is, oh yes, God gave us those five books word for word on Mount Sinai to Moses. Moses wrote it down. It's, demonstrably hard, not true because of all the little internal conflicts. The thing got codified along the way, but somewhere, let's say, after the destruction of the temple, which happened during the Roman era. When Jesus was around, there still was a temple, right? We know that he went there. But after that, it got destroyed, and there was a general shift to focusing on text rather than focusing on ritual and sacrifice. And that text took, several hundred years to be finally compiled and identified. And somewhere 6th to 10th century Common Era, the rabbinic leadership in Babylonia at the time, which was the center of Jewish learning, said, okay, we'll do it this way. We'll read the thing on an annual cycle. We'll chop it up into 52 sections. So every week we read a different section. And then once a year, we will have a holiday and we'll do it all over again. So let me just say something. So this then is only 1,000 years old, this holiday. It's young by Jewish standards. When I sometimes lead the Torah discussion at my synagogue on a Saturday morning, I have now sort of like a standard opening to people, which was considered very cute the first couple of times I said it, and is not cute anymore, but I still say it. I usually say something like, "Welcome to the world's longest running book club, going 2,000 years and still on the same book." And that's what we are. We are a people of the book. And the role of a text in Judaism is really, really central. Judaism is hardly unique in that. Certainly in Islam, it is important to try to master the recitation of the Quran and to master it in its Arabic. I often tell people who are looking at various translations of the Torah, in Islam, there are no translations of the Quran. There are interpretations in English, Japanese, Russian, whatever, but the Quran is only understood in the language in which it was given. The Prophet, peace be unto him, was spoken to in Arabic. You got to learn it in Arabic. Um, in Sikhism, I know almost nothing about it, but I know that the final guru is the Guru Granth Sahib, which is in fact a text. And the decision was made, we will leave the text as our final authority. And so there's a primacy there. So the whole idea of revering a book is not an unusual idea. Again, the one I'm referring to here is what we call Chumash, which basically means five. I'm holding up my hand. Some of you may know a Chamsa. Let's see if I can turn this around. You can see a whole bunch of them hanging in the corner of my house. Those are Chamsas, what's called the Hand of Fatima, whatever. But Chamsa comes from the word Chamesh, Chumash, the 5 books of Moses. Okay, so what actually happens on this holiday? People gather in the synagogue. Several of the Jewish holidays tend to be home-based, but this one is synagogue-based because the Torah is housed at the synagogue. One comes to the synagogue to read it collectively, and it is read 3 times a week, Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Saturday, of course, because that's the Sabbath, and Monday and Thursday, of course, because that's the day for the camel market. And they instituted public readings on the days that everyone would come together for the camel market, way back when. And, you had everyone coming in from the villages that day, so we'll read it. And every week or so, it'll be a different chunk. So what we do on Simchat Torah is we read the very last section as everyone gathers around, the last, 10 verses or so of the book. And then they take the scroll and they roll, 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 roll. It's old technology. It's, before the printing press. And they roll the thing all the way back to the beginning. And people kind of stand there around and watch as things go by. Oh, look, there's the 10 Commandments. Oh, look, there's the Song of the Sea. Oh, look, it goes past you. Until we get to the very beginning. And then we read the opening, the story of creation. We read the first, whatever it takes, the first 7 days. So it's a completion and a commencement. And I think there's something in our own life cycles that this speaks to. How often we go through completion and then commencement. We go and to be with a parent who dies at the age of 101. We arrange the funeral. We pack up the house. We hug everybody, and we come back to town. This is the cycle of our lives in many, many ways when it works right. It doesn't work right when children are murdered in their homes by bombs falling upon them in a civilian population. But the normal process is one to be honored. Judaism in general works from evening to morning, from darkness to light. It's an interesting thing that we do. The new year is in the fall. And then we go through the winter and then springtime. All Jewish holidays, as you may know, begin at nighttime into the darkness and then are celebrated the next day in daylight. So we have a tradition of starting at the low point, starting when the light is weak, starting when things are getting colder, starting when things look like they're going to get worse, worse, worse. I appreciate hearing now that, Baxter reminding us that sometimes things look worse, but light emerges. And so Simchat Torah does part of that cycle. Because at the very end of the book of Deuteronomy, we have the death of Moses. Everyone's been across the desert for years. Moses has been instructing us for all kinds of things. And then Moses himself does not get to go into the promised land. He dies. The book talks about his death. It doesn't talk about then the moving into the land. Story ends there. Scroll, 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 scroll all the way back. And then we read about creation. And we read about lightness. And we read about the creation of the animals. And we read about birth and people. And the whole story begins again. So, kind of a darkness to light system. People gather at Simchas Torah either on, well, both on the evening of and the daytime. Um, Truly, like Orthodox families will do both. They'll come both at night and at day and go through this process of beginning and again. Most contemporary North American practice, especially when Simchat Torah falls on a midweek, is you come at night. Night's the big time. The kids are off school and make a big party of it. And the next day, the attendance is much, much lighter. Many people are at work. If your kids are attending a Jewish school, it will be closed. But if your kids are attending public school, it's probably not one of the holidays you'd have them stay home for. So the nighttime tends to be the bigger festivity. Certainly within my congregation here in Vancouver, we had a Simchat Torah evening. We did not do anything the following day, although some of the larger, more mainstream congregations did. So what happens that night? Two things. One, as I explained, is there is the actual reading of the last section, scroll, 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 back to the beginning, and then read the front section. But before you get there, there's a general dancing and celebration. Because the Torah, because the whole process of learning is so highly revered, you just have a good time. And so they take all the scrolls that a synagogue may have. A small community might have only one or two. An established one might have 6, 7, 12 scrolls for a variety of reasons. I don't know, conspicuous consumption. And they'll just bring them all out because they all get honored. They all get put on somebody's shoulders, and you dance it around, and you go around, generally around the central reading arc, and usually go 7 times. 7 times. There we go. 7 being the kind of definitive Jewish number, not exactly a sacred number, but 7 again is the number of days of creation. And so many, many things are viewed to be in 7. 7 is a kind of a parallel for perfection. And so each time we go around, there's a dance, and each time there are verses called out, and there's a series of poems written as an alphabetical acrostic, A, B, C, D, although it's in Hebrew, it's Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, usually the attributes of God, and that gets sung around as people dance. And everybody gets a turn. So maybe in some traditional congregations, the first round is given to the president of the congregation or is given to the blah, blah, blah. There's a tradition in some Sephardi congregations, which is, congregations based in North Africa, whatever, that they will auction the aliyot, the aliyahs, the going around, the hakafa. They'll auction it out. And the various more wealthy people in the community will outbid each other for it, and that's the fundraiser for the community, right? You all got to raise money somehow. Got to pay for the building and pay for the salaries. That's not common in North America that you do an auction. It usually goes to people that you want to honor. You want to honor this person, that person, that person, so they get called in the first or the second round. But of course, we do it 7 times. So ultimately, everybody gets a chance. It's very, very democratic. In my synagogue, which is not structured that way, the first is like, well, who wants to hold the Torah? Various people come up, and away it goes. So I mean, we don't personally have a hierarchy, and many synagogues don't anymore. Um, so it's a mass participation, and as it's going around, people carrying the Torah and dancing and singing and all that, everybody else joins in the parade. Almost nobody stays in the seats unless you're feeling lazy or you're, infirm. And the kids come. A key element of a Simchat Torah event is the kids come and they march around. When I was a kid, I just had this discussion yesterday with my son and my grandchildren. When I was a kid in the 1950s in Winnipeg, we all got little flags, little paper flags on a little wooden stick, and you stuck an apple on top. And we all went around, with the flags and the apples. And if you got hungry, you ate the apple. And of course, if you're a 9-year-old boy, you picked up your apple, threw it at another 9-year-old boy, and there'd be chaos going on, and people going, "Quiet, quiet! This is synagogue. Can't do that. Can't do that." Of course, it happens every year. Sort of the flags and apples have faded away. So my son, who was 49, don't remember how old my son is. So my son was 49, remembers going around when we took him to synagogue with a flag, no apple. But my daughter-in-law, who's, did not have that tradition at all. And my grandkids going, "What? Flags? What are you talking about? Nobody does flags. They give us some candy. That's nice." So involving the kids in whatever way you can is an important element to it. So I want to give you a visual sense of it. And what I did is I went online and dug out a few pictures. And let's see, how do I do screen share here? I hit that little green box. And then I flip over there. Okay. Are you seeing the word Simchat Torah?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So why is screen share not happening? Oh, I see. Whoops.
Got the big screen now. We're good.
Yeah. What are you seeing? Are you seeing
Simchat Torah?
You're seeing Simchat Torah?
Yep.
Okay. Good. So these are a couple things I took off the internet. At the end, I have some pictures I took myself. So not too hard to search and get these kinds of things. What you see there, of course, is a typical scroll, a Torah scroll, parchment, handwritten on a couple wooden rollers. I mean, you don't see all that, but that's stylized what it's all about. And behind it are some of the symbols of the season, palm branches, citrons, and those are all connected with the holiday of Sukkot, which I talked about last time, and which just ended. Simchat Torah is at the very last day of Sukkot. So that's a kind of a cartoonized version. Whoopsie. There we go. And that is, are you also getting with me on there? Or are you just getting this? Hang on, what if I?
Can we see the 8th grade day celebration service?
Yeah, okay. I just don't know how much is coming through. And this is somebody's graphic from somewhere that I picked up. But what you see here, again, it's, celebration for Simchat Torah, inviting you to come and participate. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys dancing around, waving a Torah, that kind of thing. They look fairly religious, classical. They got the big furry hats and all that. And the 3 in the middle are all kind of holding a Torah. Okay, that gives you a sense of the celebration. Whoops, I keep hitting the wrong screen. This is a picture of how it may have looked in some of the great synagogues of Europe in the, let's say, 1700s. Fellow in the front, dressed all in black, carrying a Torah. Behind him is somebody else holding a Torah with a blue covering. Off the other side of him is somebody holding a Torah with a light covering. Those are kind of old classical ones. And here is a sort of more modern stylized cartoon version of it. One fellow at the front is wearing a prayer shawl back to you. The scroll is open in front of him and he is reading from it. and then the fellow with the black hat holding a Torah going around with a bunch of kids singing and dancing, going Yahoo whoopee. No flags, by the way, all beside them. This is a little stylized because we don't do the two events together, right? The reading and the carrying around, one's after the other, but that's okay. Um, However, as you may or may not have noticed, it certainly bothered me, in all these pictures which I have shown you, well, at least these three, 1, 2, and 3, all you're seeing is males. All you're seeing is boys, right? There are no females in these pictures. This becomes particularly profound when you look at this one. This is a picture, it's a photo taken in Jerusalem on Simchat Torah at the Western Wall. My cursor here, I'm running around, that is the Western Wall. The wall is the outer wall of the temple courtyard built by Herod the Great, 2,000 years ago. And behind, just to give you a sense of it, I think my cursor shows you a bridge. That bridge leads from kind of a pedestrian area over the top and onto the section above. And what's on the section above, of course, is the El Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, a point sacred in Islam. And so therefore this whole thing becomes a flashpoint. Oopsie. Here we go. What the Israelis have done since taking over that area in 1967 is they've sent the archaeologists in who have excavated a large section along the wall, which had been previously all covered by houses. And now, as you can see, there's some kind of a tunnel which runs underneath houses. So there's buildings above us. The photographer standing inside the tunnel, and people are going in a circle. Like I said, the hakafot are done in a circle. And these tunnels are a one-way system. You pour in, you stand by the Western Wall, then you run through the tunnels, which take you quite a distance. Ultimately, you pop out at another part of the city, and then you kind of come around again for another one, again and again and again. And so this is a Simchat Torah celebration. I don't know from what year. Right in the center here, there is somebody holding up a Torah scroll nice and prominently. That's one. Over here to the side is 2. Beside it in white is 3. Over here in white is 4. Over here in white is 5. Over here in white is 6. Over here is a trio of them. They're being tilted towards you, so all you can see are the handles. That's 3 more. There's a red one over there. There's a white one over there. And, so there's just like everyone who can is carrying a Torah, and they're dancing around. But as I said, these are all men. And back here, you can make out a fence, and behind the fence are the women, and the women also have copies of the Torah and are also singing and dancing. But traditional Judaism and this whole area is under the control of the chief rabbinate of Israel. It's very, very traditional. The men-women separation is quite strong, and I find rather objectionable. This is a much more contemporary sense of kind of how we view this in North America. It's a family event. Everyone comes out, the grandparent, the mom, the dad, the kids. We all kind of dance around with the scroll. And this is a picture of a celebration. I don't know exactly where. I picked this up off the web, as I said. Probably some synagogue in, I don't know, like Amherst, Massachusetts, or Cleveland or someplace. Clearly a more liberal democratic grouping, because I can see 4 copies of the Torah here. One here being held by a fellow in a prayer shawl, one here being held by a fellow in a prayer shawl, one here being held by a woman in a prayer shawl. Oh, actually, 5 of them. One here being held by a woman in a prayer shawl, and one here being held by a woman in a prayer shawl. So a more egalitarian setup, and everyone else kind of joining hands, singing. This kid over here seems to be holding a flag type thing. Hard to say. This kid over here seems to be holding a flag. Yeah. So they still have the flag tradition of some sense that I had when I was a kid. This is earlier this week. This is my congregation. We own 4 scrolls. One was purchased for us by somebody in town who wanted to endow every young congregation with a scroll. One we got from the defunct congregation of Portage la Prairie, Manitoba, which had a scroll for, I don't know, 100 years, and then kind of wound up in the 1950s and 60s when all the Jews left Portage la Prairie, and we became the inheritors of it. One of them, I believe, is a Holocaust scroll, meaning that it ended up in a big pile of scrolls confiscated by the Nazis and dumped somewhere. The community, the Jews, in fact, themselves are dead. And the scrolls have been spread around the world in memory of those who have died. And this one might even be our original scroll, the one that was being held by this young woman here. Anyway, that's our community. And whoops, I keep swiping the wrong thing. Doop-doo. And this was a little video that I took. I don't normally take videos, but since Simchat Torah is a question of dancing celebration, here's my community in operation several days ago. I'm pausing right now just to point out, some of you may know Rabbi Laura Duan Kaplan, who is involved with the Vancouver School of Theology. Folks in Vancouver might know her. She comes into view, and my camera just kind of follows her for a while. I can name most of the other people, but you can't, so no much point. Okay, darn. How do I end screen share and screen stop share? Blink. Oh, and I'm back. All right. So that's a bit of a visual of how it may have looked, several hundred years ago, how it looks in certain more Orthodox circles, and how it looks in my world, in the more contemporary North American kind of conservative Reform congregation circles. But I think what you are entitled to is the opinion of somebody who is not Jewish. And so I would like to read to you a firsthand account of what it's like to go to a synagogue on Simchat Torah. Some of you may know the name Samuel Pepys, spelled P-E-P-Y-S. I always assumed it was Pepys, but apparently it's Pepys. Samuel Pepys was middle upper class Englishman in London in the mid 1600s. He ended up having some minor job within the Admiralty, but he moved within London society. He was an advocate of, he was a devotee of the theater, always went to the theater, loved fine wine, and apparently loved many women in addition to his wife. Many of them seem to appear in the diary which he wrote. And somewhere around 1660, he began to write a very meticulous diary. Every morning he got up, what he ate, who he met with, what was going on around him, his opinions on various matters. And there were a lot of matters. In the 1660s, he was there during the Great Fire of London, the Great Plague. The book begins, his diary begins about 2 years after the fall of Oliver Cromwell and the restoration of the monarchy under King Charles III. He writes during the Anglo-Dutch Wars, and because he was involved in the Admiralty and had to deal with ships, this was a major preoccupation of his. And he writes this diary every day, what he did, what he did, what he did. I will read to you. Clearly, the guy knows nothing about Jews. He would have been a good, solid Anglican member of the Anglican Church. And a few things to know before I read you his diary about going to synagogue that day. One is he did not know it was Simchat Torah. He did not know anything really about Judaism. We know that it wasn't a regular Sabbath event because he has meticulously dated this as Wednesday, October the 14th, 1663. Incidentally, this year, Simchat Torah fell on Tuesday, October the 14th, 2025. So, the calendars are not the same. It's a lunar solar calendar, so it falls out of step, but pretty close this year, 362 years after he wrote this. Also, the thing that you should know is that the Jewish community of London at the time was largely composed of and led by a wave of Jews who had moved from Amsterdam. And the reason there was a large Jewish community in Amsterdam is that they had fled Catholic Spain. 1492, the Edict of Expulsion, become Catholic, convert, or die, or leave. And many, many, many left, and many left from Catholic Spain and later on Catholic Portugal, and moved to Protestant Holland, which is a much more tolerant society, although the arrangement with the Dutch authorities is keep it low, keep to yourselves, don't make a public fuss, and you'll be okay. And many of them then moved to England, which after Cromwell was becoming much more open and liberal. So many of the Jews are what are even today referred to as the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue. And if you go there today, the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue of London is functioning, and it still is a major synagogue, and it does things, with different languages as well. That's one thing to know. Secondly, he uses the word veils. It's an older English. Reading this, I realized what he means by veils is what we would call a prayer shawl. When I go in to pray, I put a prayer shawl over my shoulders. Sometimes people actually put it over their heads. There were many of them in the pictures which I showed you, people wearing their prayer shawls when they carried the Torah. It's a sign of respect. Okay. So when you hear the word veil, it's referring to that. And okay. So he talks about the morning, and he had to do various things, and I think he popped in at the Admiralty to see how things were happening, blah, 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 blah. Thence home. And after dinner, my wife and I, by Mr. Rawlinson's conduct, went to the Jewish synagogue, where the men and boys in their veils, and the women in behind a lattice out of sight, and some things stand up, which I believe is their law, in a press, to which all coming do bow, and at the putting on of their veils do say something, to which others they hear them do cry, Amen, and the party do kiss his veil. Their service, all in a singing way, and all in Hebrew. And anon, their laws, that they take out of the press, are carried by several men, 4 or 5 several burdens in all, and they do relieve one another. And whether it is that everyone desires to have the carrying of it, I cannot tell. Thus, they carried it round the room while such a service is singing. And in the end, they had a prayer for the king, which they pronounced his name in Portugal, but the prayer, like the rest, in Hebrew. But Lord, to see the disorder, laughing, sporting, and no attention, but confusion in all their service, more like brutes than people knowing the true God, would make a man forswear ever seeing them evermore. And indeed, I never did see so much, or could have imagined that there had been any religion in the whole world so absurdly performed as this. Away thence with my mind strongly disturbed by them, my coach, I set down my wife and Mr. Hall, went to Whitehall, where I blah, 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 and he carries on with his day. So here we go. Objectively, one man's opinion of what it's like in a synagogue on Simchat Torah. 363 years ago, from a fellow who knew absolutely nothing about Jewish practice. But the disorder is true. Synagogue services are much more casual than, let's say, the rectitude that Anglicans sitting in the pew would recognize as being somehow devotional. Okay, a few final things. One, as I mentioned earlier, that Simchat Torah follows the holiday of Sukkot, the 7-day holiday in which we live in little booths with open lattice work, as a time to remember the story of leaving Egypt, living vulnerability in the desert. Sukkot is all about vulnerability. And so you spend 7 days immersed in a physical home which is not solid. I think Simchat Torah suggests that our physical home is not our movements, is not our vulnerability. Our permanent home is the text. Like the Guru Granth Sahib, the text itself is where we belong. There used to be, by the way, a celebration back in temple times called the Simchat Beis Shoeva, kind of a water party when everybody celebrated water, which, those of us in the west coast of BC would certainly be well to do. It may well be sort of like if you go to Bali and there's a water festival and you get hit by water bombs. I'm not too sure. Apparently, there's a big, big party, a huge festival at the end of Sukkot. That has faded away, I guess, with the destruction of the temple. This seems to have filled in its place, in some sense, hitting a lot of the same emotional, live it up party elements to it, because we need times of joy. As I said, the story moves from darkness, a death of Moses, to fresh beginnings. And so the issue of creation, rebirth, from darkness to light, embedded in the text, I think also parallels much of our human experience. So there are two historical things to throw in here. One is, those of you who are old enough, my generation, may well remember before the Soviet Union fell, the movement to the refuseniks, Jewish opposition to the Soviet power, where religion in general, did not get a good view. The Soviets weren't all that big on the Russian Orthodox Church either, but certainly Jews got it harder than most. Well, I don't know that. I don't know how the other religions got it. But where it began to kind of break down is that for some reason, Simchat Torah, young Jews began to gather outside the great synagogue in Moscow. Now, inside the great synagogue in Moscow were probably all of 15 old guys walking around with a Torah, maybe only one Torah left. But out on the streets, young people came. They didn't bother going into the synagogue. They simply danced on the streets. And the idea caught on, and the following year, Simchat Torah, there was an even bigger party. And the following year, there's an even bigger one. And there was like no greater challenge to the Soviet authorities than people gathering on the streets, not with guns, not with picket signs, not with anger, but with joy. I mean, I am hoping that that will be the same element in the No Kings events taking place today in the States. The edicts are very clear. No violence, nothing. We're here to celebrate. If there's one thing that the military powers cannot stand, that the fascists cannot stand, it is people actually coming together happily and being happy. And so there was something to that this particular holiday became the venue for opposition to the Soviet regime. Even during the dark times, you got to sing, you got to dance. That's who we are. And the other one, the final one, is that Simchat Torah has developed yet another connotation because it was on Simchat Torah, October 7th, 2023, that the Jewish people suffered its greatest attack since the mass murder of the Holocaust. And it was a day of just unspeakable murder of children, young people at a dance, um, a dance party. Who were the people at a dance party? These are not your militants. The militants are often in yeshiva studying somewhere. These generally were your young peaceniks who were dancing, doing drugs, and all of a sudden in came the murderers, rape, all that kind of thing. Totally terrified the Israeli mentality, and which then led to 2 months, 2 years of bloodbath retributions with the bombings of hospitals, the murders of tens of thousands of children, tens of thousands of women, and a few thousand soldiers as well. A terrible event. That happened on Simchat Torah. I don't know whether it was chosen that way by the organizers of Hamas. I mean, they did a lot of good choices, you know. They pulled off the thing really well, including they must have made some type of calculation about how many of their own people they're prepared to lose in the retribution, because they knew there would be a retribution. Last year at Simchat Torah, we were still in year one of my God, this isn't over yet. The war is still going on. Hostages haven't been released. We're still continuing to bomb Gaza. This is terrible. This year at Simchat Torah, at least we got the word that it's not a peace deal, that a ceasefire had been arranged, and step one of beginning to address the issues, at least the mass murder in Gaza, had eliminated. The hostages are back. And now we need to address issues like the occupation of the West Bank and all that. I'd like to suggest that as we move, hopefully, from darkness to light, from nighttime to daytime, as the cycles carry on, the cycles do not carry on in violence, the cycles can carry on in rebirth, in regeneration, in hope, and that the Torah will bring us all of us, simcha, which means joy. I wish you all joy. Thank you.